I'd never know she'd been, but for the polish on my knobs.
That's what we are, Vi. The invisible women.
Kiss me once, kiss me twice, then kiss me once again.
Isn't it divine? £500. 500 quid for a dress? When I put it on, nothing else matters. My Eddie would love to see me in a Dior gown. War's been over a long time. Your Eddie's never coming back.
Nothing wrong with dreaming, Ada. That's what you are. You're a dreamer.
You should have been receiving a war widow's pension. It comes quite a tidy sum.
Oh, it's my Eddie. It's a sign from my angel. What are you going to do? I'm going to buy a dress. A Christian Dior from Paris. Paris.
Ni ses départs, ni ses navires.
Excuse me, dear. I'm after a frock. One of them £500 ones. You have the wrong dress.
Please let me escort you out.
No, hang on a minute. I saved every penny scrubbing floors so I can buy this frock.
Excuse me, but it would be my honor to have you view the collection as my guest.
Ni tout cela, ni rien au monde.
Oh, that's lovely.
À nous faire oublier.
Your dress is designed to astonish. How will you do that, Mrs. Harris? You are nobody, invisible.
Madame, may I give you a lift?
What was I thinking coming here? I'm just a cleaner from London.
No, you're a cleaner who dreams up the most beautiful gown in the world.
It's not sewing. It's making moonlight.
You dared to follow your dreams, Mrs. Harris.
Bravo.
This is not possible. Not at all.
Where are you going, Mrs. Harris?
To see the boss. Mrs. Harris, these are for you from Monsieur Le Marquis.
I've spent too long on my own, wishing my life away. You don't want to do the same thing.
This is your chance.
I have never encountered anyone like you.
Come on, girls, follow me.
Today, there's a new woman, a modern woman.
I thought it was too late. Now I'm not so sure. Who's that bloke?
That's the master himself, Monsieur Dior.
He looks like my milkman.
Director, co-writer, co-producer Anthony Fabian, right here. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, this movie, I gotta tell you just hit all the right notes in this. It's a fairy tale, and it's got all of that going for it, but it's also realistic in its own way. It doesn't fall prey to a lot of traps that you could have fallen to. I'm wondering, when you adapted this, the book, there was that Angela Lansbury movie and things. What was your thinking in bringing this up to 2022 and making it work for audiences today?
I think my aim was always to make it both period and modern at the same time, and which is a sort of tricky game. I think some of the ways in which it feels a bit fresher is that we, for example, had Mrs. Harris's best friend played by a Jamaican actress, obviously in the original, in the book, and in the Lansbury, she's another Cockney lady. But
she's great. That's Ellen Thomas.
Ellen Thomas, yeah. She's
as Vi.
isn't she? Yeah.
She's terrific.
So that was something that had historical veracity, because the Windrush, which was the ship that brought people over from Jamaica, brought a whole generation of people from Jamaica seeking a better life in the UK. And so we were able to dip into history to create something that was both real and felt in a way more contemporary. And I think the main difference between this adaptation and the previous one, apart from the fact that this is designed for the cinema, for the big screen, which is why I'm so glad you're all watching it on the big screen and not at home.
Well, I just so insisted on that.
Yeah.
We have to see these movies the way they are designed to be seen.
Exactly.
And this is a great screen, the Arrow Theater.
Yeah. So obviously it has a cinematic approach to the way that it was made. So that's obviously a massive difference. But I wanted to get into more depth about why Mrs. Harris becomes obsessed with this dress, because Gallico doesn't really help you in that matter.
Paul Gallico, who wrote this in 1958.
So he published it in 58, We've set the movie in 57. And the reason for that is that I wanted to be able to have a fashion show at the middle of the film which encompasses the entire 10 years of his output, Christian Dior. His fashion house only existed for 10 years before he died. And
he died relatively young, like age 52 or something.
He liked his food a bit too much, and he died of a heart attack, so that may be a warning to anyone here. No, he unfortunately, he was very, very young, 57, he was born at the start of the century. And yeah, so he had an intern or a young designer who joined the company in 1957, and that was Yves Saint Laurent. And Yves Saint Laurent then ran Christian Dior for a year or two before he decided to start his own fashion house.
Oh, wow. Well, this could not be a better commercial for Christian Dior right now at this time to see this film. What kind of cooperation did you get? Which I imagine you would have gotten a lot.
It's really interesting because on one level we couldn't have made the film without Christian Dior's cooperation. Obviously the logo of Christian Dior and all of the copyright on the actual dresses which you see in the film, we had to have their approval to use that. But at the same time they were wary of this being a commercial for Christian Dior. They thought it would be damaging to the film for it to be too close a connection and too much of a sort of advertorial for them. So they've kept their distance to some degree, but at the same time, they gave us access to their archives, they gave us the architectural drawings, so that the House of Dior is exactly architecturally what it was and what it is, not today because it's been entirely reformed now in the last few years. But some of it, the elements are still there. For example, the grand staircase that you see in the film is still there. But this was very important because how each space relates to every other space during the fashion show is critical. So the fact that the models can go from their dressing room across the hallway into the salon, through the salon and in front of the staircase where the press sat, and then back to the dressing room to change into their next dress. That was actually physically possible because we recreated the exact spaces. And then of course, when it came to the choice of dresses, we had a meeting with Jenny Bevan early on, who's the costume designer, and they immediately said, what year is this set? You know, here is the collection, spring, summer from 1957. And we poured through that. And out of the 250 options that there were for that, because each show was 250 different designs, we obviously made a selection. But because I wanted to show the whole output of Dior, we also have 4 or 5 dresses that are from an earlier period. So for example, the first dress that comes out is the iconic bar dress, which is what set the new look in 1947. So if you like, the show starts in 1947 and finishes in 1957.
You mentioned Jenny Bevan, 3-time Oscar-winning costume designer, so many different kinds of movies. A Room with a View, Mad Max, Fury Road, last year Cruella. She's an extraordinary designer, and this must have been just a dream job for a costume designer. I bet everybody was knocking at your door here with this one.
Well, this is really true. I had a secret weapon, which was, you know, the possibility of creating this love letter to the old House of Dior, and every costume designer is, of course, in love with what Dior did. And in our first meeting, I said to Jenny, okay, well look, this is a magic realism fairy tale, so I would like you to out-Dior in what you create. You know, be inspired by him, but do something more magnificent. And she said, you're absolutely mad. There's no possibility of doing anything better than Christian Dior. So she insisted that we actually make replicas of the designs, but of course the choice And the color and the shape and the form and the progress of the show was very much in her control. And she did, in the end, sneakily, create 3 dresses, which are what I would call Bevan Dior, which are the 3 story dresses. So the first dress that Ada falls in love with, the green dress that she thinks she might want and in the end has made for her, and the red dress that, as you now know, she ends up with.
Those are all original designs by Jenny Bevan.
They're all Dior-inspired original Jenny Bevan designs.
And you're right, when you talked about the story dresses, there's such a character in this movie, and you know, just like you're following it like it's a person, almost, this dress.
Yeah, and in fact, somebody said something which I really loved. They said that the first moment when Ada sees the dress, it's done as you would in a romantic comedy when the 2 protagonists meet for the first time.
Exactly. Well, I have to talk about Leslie Manville, who's great, and ironically was in a very different kind of role in Phantom Thread, also dealing with 50s couture, and she's just so perfect for this role. But if you've seen her in some of her recent films, this is a real departure, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing about Leslie is she is an extraordinarily versatile actress. But the 2 projects that in a way convinced me that she had everything we needed for this, Phantom Thread, of course, where you see, I had never seen her play a character like that, and it was so multi-dimensional. I thought she acted Daniel Day-Lewis off the screen, to be honest. But then she did a series for the BBC which ran to 3 seasons called Mum. And in that series, she plays a very kind, slightly put upon, lower middle class matriarch who has lost her husband and is trying to have a new relationship, and her family are constantly undermining her. But she's she refuses to rise to all of their taunting. And that role I thought was the closest I'd seen to Ada Harris, so that's what convinced me she was the right person.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just such a perfect performance and so beautifully done in this. But the whole cast, you know, everybody is so well cast here. Jason Isaacs, and what can I say about Isabelle Huppert, who just, I've had the pleasure of interviewing her several times, and when she was nominated for Academy Award, it was like every other week she was here. And it was great to see her in so many different roles, but this is a wonderful role for her. She's terrific.
Yeah, she really is great. She doesn't do that much English language work, and obviously she's super picky and extremely in demand and very busy. I'm not entirely sure why she agreed to do this, but I did promise her that she would look spectacular, and I think that might have had something to do with it.
This Dior dress that you desire so much, where will you wear it? At the Vienna Opera Ball or Queen Charlotte's? Will you wear it to polished floors, or will you keep it shut in your little wardrobe? A Dior dress is designed to astonish and delight. How will you do that, Mrs. Harris? You, forgive me for saying this, but you are nobody, invisible. How will you give this dress the life it deserves?
It's my dream.
She's great, and you may, how many people have seen Emily in Paris on Netflix? Anybody? Okay, the young man here is Lucas Bravo. He's from that show, yeah, so.
Yeah, that was one of those lucky things. Before Luciana Righi came on board as the production designer, I had a French designer called Anne Sebel, who in the end had a conflict, so she wasn't able to do this film. But while she was still on board, she was the designer of Emily in Paris, as well as Midnight in Paris, and probably every film that has Paris in the title. And we arranged to meet for the second time, and I was in Paris at the time, and she said, "Come and meet me at this square. We're filming Emily in Paris there, and we'll have a quick meal in the cafe opposite." So I met her, and then she looked at me and she said, "There's a young man I think you should meet. I think you're looking for a young man, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, Yes, we are. So she took me into the makeup room, and there was Lucas sitting, having his makeup done, and he looked at me with these incredibly piercing eyes. And she explained a little bit, oh, we're doing this film together, and I explained the plot. And we had this incredible conversation where the entire room just disappeared around us. And his responses to the story, the people involved, and he said, well, I could only dream to be involved with a project like that. And then off he went to shoot his scene. And just bit by bit by bit, I dissuaded the producers from hiring a name for that part. And I kept saying, you know, there's this actor, he's doing this series, you know, maybe you'd be interested. And as luck would have it, everything just fell into place and I was able to cast him.
That's so great. Now, so where did you shoot this? I mean, obviously London, England. Did you shoot all the rest in Paris, or where was it?
If we had triple or maybe quadruple the budget that we had, we could have shot the majority of the film in Paris. But in order to put all the money on the screen that we did have, we shot the bulk of the film in Budapest, which may explain all the Hungarian names in the credits at the end. But we did shoot in London and Paris because you can't recreate some of those exteriors anywhere else. So it was very judicious use of the real thing, and then taking advantage of the wonderful film industry that Hungary has to offer.
And also, probably that period in the 50s, you're able to recreate that, you know, in some ways in a better way, maybe.
100%. I mean, Paris is so cleaned up now. It's such a jewel box, and they have this program where every 10 years, every building has to be cleaned. So it's you know, it's so pristine. But in the 50s, it wasn't at all. It was still war-torn, and Budapest still has a lot of buildings that have bullet holes in them, and they look a bit tatty and are, you know, black with soot. And so it actually looked more like Paris in the 50s than Paris does.
So perfect, lucky you on that. You grew up as a kid. You lived in Paris, did you not?
Yeah, that's right. So my father moved to Paris when I was 7. And it's one of the reasons why I really wanted to make this film, because I've seen many films made by non-French people about the French, and I find them quite cringe-making and embarrassing. I hate to say, Emily in Paris is quite cringy too, in some ways. But especially because, for example, I can't bear it when characters speak English to each other when they should be speaking French to each other. So what's great is in this film you have Leslie Manville is there almost all the time, so they have an excuse to be speaking in English for her sake. But wherever it wasn't necessary for her to understand, they speak French. I actually had a clause in my contract, believe it or not, that I couldn't have more than 10% French language in the film, because that puts people off, you know, they don't like reading subtitles. But I got in there just under the wire, but still managed to have people speaking French when they would naturally speak French. Two French characters would naturally speak French to each other.
That's right. When does this open in Paris?
Really late, not until November.
Oh.
I think they're just trying to soften the French public, you know, who are quite fussy. And if it's perceived to be a big international success, they might accept it.
Maybe the presence of people like Isabelle Huppert.
Yeah, I mean, I was really strict in the casting about only casting French actors in the French parts, because again, that was another thing that irritated me. In the Angela Lansbury, you have Diana Rigg playing the Isabelle Huppert part, great British actress, but she's not French, is she? And Omar Sharif in the Lambert Wilson part, he's not French either, is he? And you had Lothar Buteau, who's a French-Canadian actor playing the Lucas Bravo part, and God knows where Natasha was from, but I really wanted these actors, these characters to be played by French people. And I think audiences can sniff authenticity, and I think it makes a difference.
Definitely. Let's see if you guys have any questions out there. Yes, right back there.
Hey, how are you doing? thought that really struck me fascinating watching this movie is how much we don't realize the class structure of fashion. That when somebody wears a certain thing, we look at them in a certain way, we evaluate who they are. And when somebody wears something different, and there's that great scene between Isabel and
Ada.
Leslie, where she says, "You're nobody, so why should you wear this?" Can you talk a little bit about, thematic-wise, delving into that, and what you hope people kind of absorb from that? Because that's still happening today.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's actually about the class differences and all of that as depicted in the film.
So it's a very, very good point you raise. Everybody knows the phrase "you are what you wear," right? So obviously people judge you by your appearance, by what you're wearing, by the clothes, by the labels. That's why there's this appalling habit of many of the fashion labels of actually writing the name of the label on the clothes, which I think is appalling. So obviously we had to make Ada recognizably not part of that world when she arrives, scruffily in her old coat. And what's really interesting about what you're saying is that British culture is obviously one of the most class stratified cultures in the world. But the fashion world is also very stratified. You've got haute couture right at the top, and then you've got pret-a-porter, but that can be anything from a name designer to, a sort of generic or a copycat firm like Zara or Topshop. And one of the things that this film talks about is the democratization of fashion. So you have that scene where Lucas Bravo comes out of Dior's office having sold him the idea of accessories to give everybody a little piece of Dior and to help the house survive. And he says, and today there's a new woman, today there's Mrs. Harris. And basically she represents the possibility that anybody who works hard enough and desires it enough can actually have a piece of this dream, of this fantasy. And then finally, to your point, I would say that Ada Harris, as a widow of long-standing, who was faithful to her husband in her mind till her own death, up until this whole event takes place, she's never really felt beautiful for a very long time. And there's something about the dress, when Lady Dant says, when I put this on, nothing else matters. And then the moment that follows when she's in front of the mirror and she puts it up against herself, and we took a lot of care over that shot where the dress is up against her and she's reflected in multiple images on either side in the wardrobe. And it's because the dress makes her feel beautiful. And I'm sure that there isn't a person in this room who hasn't in some way felt transformed by a beautiful garment. So I think we're also touching on that effect of clothes on one's sense of self and self-worth.
I was thinking that tonight when I put my jeans on.
Absolutely, I'm really admiring, the color coordination.
It's impressive, isn't it?
Very,
yeah.
very good.
Okay, who else? Yeah, right there. Hi.
Oh, me?
Yeah, that's you.
I wanted to thank you. Such a beautiful, beautiful movie. And I had a question about maybe a hidden gem within the movie. I noticed that the name said Ada, or in Spanish it's Ada, and you say Ada. But, in the movie, you had a reference to, people saying, oh, you're like my fairy godmother. In Spanish, Ada means fairy.
Ah, well, that's a fantastic
yeah,
thing.
So
I should have known that because I grew up in Mexico City, so I should have.
Can you repeat that for those who didn't hear?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but
my name is Nancy.
Nancy, otherwise known as Ada. She obviously in Britain we pronounce the name Ada, but in Spanish Ada, and in Spanish Ada also means a godmother. Yeah.
Godmother or a
fairy godmother, and so it's very appropriate that Ada, who plays the role of fairy godmother to various characters in the film, is called this name. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Very interesting. Yes, Ray in the back. Hi.
Hi. It's actually really interesting that you just mentioned that you grew up in Mexico City because I'm Latina. I'm half Mexican, half Costa Rican. And when I was young, my mother dressed me in our culture, you know, in our dresses, in vibrant colors, and, you know, the way that we dress in our culture. And it was about I thought of this as you were talking about the culture of Paris and like the snobbery and whatever, like, and it just occurred to me what I went through in my own life. When I got to middle school, I didn't see a problem with how I dressed, and all of a sudden the friends that I was in school with said to me, "Why do you dress like you're going to a party every day? Why don't you dress normal? Why do you always look like you're going to a party?" And that threw me into such a self-identity crisis that I just came home and threw away all my dresses and started wearing jeans and like just normal, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I'm disabled, so I was trying to take away as much discrimination as possible.
So you are what you wear. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. But like.
No, I mean, I think what you wear is definitely a huge part of your identity. And I, as a filmmaker, have always been drawn to stories that are about identity and belonging. Partly because mine has been so muddled. I was born in America, brought up in Mexico, moved to England when I was 11. My father moved to Paris, so my mother is Hungarian. So there's a lot of, you know, muddled.
You were born in San Francisco, right?
I was born in San Francisco on the 4th of July, so you really can't deny me my American.
Happy birthday.
Thank
you. Amazing. Anybody else out there? Yeah, right there.
It was a nightmare, but we were incredibly lucky that Hungary was the country in Europe with the fewest number of cases and the fewest restrictions. So we were still able to fly people in and out of the country. We had actors from Paris, actors from London, and we followed very strict protocols. We had lots of PCR testing. I was tested 3 times a week. We all wore masks, and not once did we have to stop production because of a COVID outbreak. So that's great. There is hope.
Amazing. Anybody else?
Oh, there's one other thing I should add about the how lucky we were about COVID was that I was able to have the pick of the best crew in Budapest because there were so few films being made at that time. So we really had the absolute A team. And also we enjoyed the curfews. So there was much less traffic on the roads. And when we filmed the scene in Paris on the Pont Neuf, on the quay by the Pont Neuf, it was curfew. So there were no tourists, there was nobody, so we didn't have to clear anybody. It was fantastic.
So advice for aspiring filmmakers out there, look for a pandemic to shoot in. Makes it a lot easier. Yes?
I was just curious about the scene where she throws away the dress. That was such a shock. Was that in the book?
Oh, yeah, the scene where she throws away the dress into the...
No, it's not in the book, but nor is the second dress in the book. So the book ends with Pamela burning her dress and her crying her heart out. And then after a couple of days, she thinks about, was it really the dress or was it the journey and the adventure and the people she'd met in Paris that this was all about? And she sort of consoled herself with the idea that it wasn't really about the dress. And then she looks at the dress and she sees that it's only really one panel that's burnt and maybe she can repair it. But it's a bit of a downer ending, I think, particularly for a movie. So weirdly enough, Freddie Fox, who plays the RAF officer, tiny part but so beautifully drawn, and he's the son of Edward Fox, the great British actor. He suggested this idea of her having a second dress, and he said the first dress is the dress that she earns through her hard work and savings and all of that. The second dress is the dress that she earns through the love that she engenders in the people around her on their trip, and I thought that was a very beautiful.
And that was so great to see each of them involved in that. That was such a perfect kind of touch. Yeah.
I love the shot of the record spinning from the point of view of the record.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm grateful that you noticed that. Thank you.
Very cool.
There's actually, if you find my Instagram account, which I encourage you all to do, there's a shot of our grip, the guy who moves the camera around, who had to set that up, sitting under the record player, trying to put it in place, and Leslie with her duster dusting his head. So you'll see how that was done.
That's great. Anybody else before we go? Yeah, in the back. Hi.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said about the ending, the second dress, because there's a couple, I think it's really great screenwriting on your part, because there was a few things I was like, oh, that's gonna happen. Like, I never read the book yet, and now I want to, but I thought, like, it's interesting. I thought she was gonna sort of repair the dress without even knowing that, and so there's a couple of times it was like surprise.
Yeah.
Like, I thought she was gonna end up with the guy, or the Paris guy.
Good.
So
I'm
I was
glad
like,
you didn't
wow,
find it
yeah.
predictable. That's great help.
It
And
was
as for
good.
throwing the dress,
Yeah.
one of the problems with adapting Gallico is that he's a bit too nice to the characters,
Yeah.
and you need to add a little bit more bite and a bit more drama and higher stakes when you make a film.
Yeah.
And so, throwing the dress overboard seemed to be a much more final gesture in a way.
I was surprised.
Yeah, you were crying?
Well, no, I was surprised. I was
Oh,
sort
okay.
of a little sad.
I hope
because
you were all crying at some point. As well as laughing.
I was a little sad at that moment, but it was sort of like
That's
a
so cool.
rom-com in a way.
All right, and one more right over here. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is, what's the demographic for this film? So it's a great question, and obviously Focus, our distributor, have been trying to find the answer to that question in terms of who to aim it to. And what's really fascinating is that their initial instinct was that this was for an older female audience. But the more they test the film, the more they show the film, the wider the audience becomes. And the younger they become, sometimes, they've discovered that there's a particular, it has a particular appeal to LGBTQ plus community as well. It certainly has a big appeal for the fashion, people who follow fashion and fashionistas. And then, of course, all the women who bring their partners, if their partners are men, to see the film. The men come reluctantly in some cases and say, this is not the kind of movie that I would normally go to see. And then they're completely enchanted. And one of the greatest joys for me is seeing grown men in floods of tears at the end of screenings because they don't anticipate liking it or being moved by it. So I'm hoping, because the world premiere of the film was in the Hamptons a couple of weeks ago, and just to my left were two young women, they must have been early 20s, and I have never felt such an intense connection between an audience member and what was going on the screen. And I just think it's wrong to say this is for 30 plus. This film will definitely appeal to a very, very wide age range and cultural range, and I think if people will give it a chance, then I think it's got the widest possible demographic.
Yes, it's definitely a word of mouth film. I think I can sense that's what's going to happen. So it is opening on Friday. How many theaters? How are they opening this?
1,000 cinemas. Yeah.
1,000. Wow. Okay, that's pretty wide break. Well, best of luck with it, and thanks for showing it to us here at KCET. cinema series, and thank you, Anthony Fabian. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right.